Welcome to For the Record, an unfiltered view on current trends and timeless advice for surviving in the aesthetics industry. Whether you're an injector, practice owner, sales rep, or marketer, it's time to set the record straight. Each week we cut through the chaos and showcase diverse perspectives and winning ideas from the best minds in the industry. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Hall, Chief Growth Officer at Aesthetic Record. Now, let's get started on this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of For the Record. And today we're taking things a little bit down under. We have one of our favorite Australians here on the show today, For the Record. She's actually in the U.S., but we have with us Danielle Mathers, who is the founder, the lead trainer, the matriarch, gets everything done, in charge of all the fabulousness of the Lux Room in Colorado, which is a 3-practice group in Boulder, Fort Collins, and Denver. And she has an incredible story. We were just laughing about it. It started with her and her husband meeting in Rome, selling tours on the cathedral, and their ability to work together and to have built this beautiful, incredible med spa after a stint in Australia, coming to the U.S., and now just really dominating the Colorado market. She just made the local Inc. 500 list, I think, for one of the best med spas, best businesses in the area. And as a gain trainer, she's also on podiums all across the U.S., including Aesthetic Next, and does cadaver labs as well with Dr. Sadat. And it's also just a joy to be around, super brilliant person, and just a delight in general, but also a badass practitioner who's running an incredible business. And so we're going to hear all of her secrets today, how she and her husband don't kill each other and grew a great business, but also how to grow and scale and to stay true to who you are as a practice and your culture. So Danielle, we are glad to have you here on For the Record. Welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I let out the biggest squeal when I saw the email for the invite. So thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's definitely an honor.
Well, we are big fans here, as you know. With Aesthetic Next, you were integral in helping us to build our new Path to Podium program and just really to show us what it looks like to be an incredible assistant at the conference, while also speaking at the conference and doing all the things at the same time, which is a testament to kind of your ability to multitask and to get it all done. I know that you mentioned in our little pre-show notes here that you don't have any balance, nor do I. But I want to take our listeners through your journey, because you are Australian trained as a nurse, but you also were in Rome. Now you're in the U.S. You've got a menagerie of travel in your background. So give us an idea of kind of where you come from and some highlights.
Okay. It's a long one, but so yeah, when I was 18, watched the movie Under the Tuscan Sun, thought it'd be a great idea to move to Italy, and did that. Started kind of working at the Colosseum, selling tours, and the Vatican. Ended up meeting my husband there within the first month of being there. So we lived there on and off for about 3 years, just traveled kind of in the winter when it was the off season. And yeah, after 3 years of doing that, we wanted to change. It was either the US or Australia, and obviously Australia sounds amazing. So we went over there, lived there for 10 years, did my bachelor degree there in nursing, started working in the med spa industry there. Back then it was kind of nice because, I mean, that was around 2011 when I started at that med spa. Within a couple of years, started injecting there. And back then there wasn't really any formal education around injecting, so you just learned on the job. So it was kind of easier to get into the industry, I suppose. So did that, worked at a public hospital there in Australia alongside working at that med spa. That med spa was interesting. It started as 3 practices as well. That one grew into over 60. And so they went through a ton of growth. It was really interesting to see them scale. But yeah, after about 10 years of being in Australia, we decided to make another move because we get bored, and decided on Colorado because I had a cousin living here. We thought it was a nice central place to be able to explore the rest of the US and decide where we want to kind of plant ourselves, and kind of started up pretty quickly once we got here. So now we're Colorado based for sure. So that was 2018 when we moved to Denver.
And I think you picked a great place to be. I mean, obviously you guys have scaled relatively quickly. If you think about 2018 till now, 3 locations. I think you have 25 or more employees. I mean, you're doing a big business, a lot of things happening every day in your practice. And I think Brad handles really the marketing, the website, more like sort of the operational part of what the public sees about it. You're managing all the internal components with training, with patients, with medical. So I think you guys kind of split the load, which is very, very interesting. So I'm curious about that just as a start, because I think we have a lot of husband and wife teams that It either makes you or breaks you as a marriage when you run a business together. How do you guys make that work? And what does that partnership look like day to day?
I think with the foundations that we had when we first met, we did work together. So I think we kind of got that out of our system, the working together and being a couple, figuring that out when we were in Italy. And so it wasn't that hard when we started up with the med spas because we have really complementing skill sets, I think. Like you said, Brad's more of that kind of left brain, really uh, good at processes, scaling, growth, marketing. Whereas I'm a little bit more right brain, a little bit more of the dreamer, artistic, obviously a nurse. And so it works really well together. When we first started, it was just a nice balance because obviously he had the experience in the business building side of everything. And then as far as injecting, that was really my passion. So it was kind of, a match made in heaven. And it's interesting how life's past experiences tend to kind of come together and make things work later and everything kind of makes sense. So yeah, 2018 is when we kind of started. We just rented a room basically at a plastic surgeon's office here in Denver. Within 2 years, we opened our first practice. And with that, yeah, things got really busy. We had kids, and then work-life balance was thrown out even more. So
Yeah, that's the one down thing. If you have two of you in the same household, you share the same kids. It's like
yeah,
who's going to tag in? Well, I don't know. It's one of the two of us. But I think it's
yeah,
interesting that you mentioned 2018 starting in a room. I'm a big believer that you start small, and I think it's easier to grow faster because you kind of save your pennies and you get some of the fundamental things right first before you start growing and scaling. 'Cause I think learning to be a business owner, if you're also a new injector, I mean, obviously you weren't new, so that's a big advantage for you. But if you're a new injector and a business owner, I just feel like that's a crazy train that you're going to hop on. But
mhm.
starting small, would you do it the same way again? Would you start like in a one room thing, grow your practice, and then get bigger? Or if you could go back to Danielle circa 2017 thinking about doing this, what would you change?
I really wouldn't change it, and it wasn't planned out that way. When we first got here, because I'd worked in a med spa before, I honestly didn't really want to own a business. I didn't want the responsibility of all of that. And so when I went to this plastic surgeon's office, I just asked him for a job, and he didn't want any more employees, but he said we can just rent a room and just kind of run it ourselves. And so that's what we did. Yeah, I wouldn't change any of that, and it ended up being a blessing in disguise just because we ended up just growing, fixing processes. And like you said, being small, you kind of have the capacity and less distraction to be able to kind of really make sure your processes are doing well, your patient care is good. It just sets those core values and you don't even know it. And then from there, that natural growth really happened. So as I was booking out further and further, it just made sense to pick a place where we have more rooms. Essentially, it didn't seem as scary at that point. There was a little more security in it. The other thing too is because we had just moved from Australia, we didn't have any credit. We weren't able to get any loans for anything, so we really had to bootstrap it. Again, another blessing in disguise. So we had no debt, but we definitely had budgets down to when we were planning the fit out. By the inch, I had to shorten counter space because of budget. Like, it's just what we had. And so there's things now that I'm dealing with that were issues because of budgetary reasons before, but it's humbling.
Yeah, I think you were right at the tail end or the start of COVID. I think you opened up at the tail end with your new practice. I think what you said about, really pinching your pennies going into COVID, if you had a brand new big location and then you have no patients for how many months you guys were closed in Colorado, I bet that's a scary place to be. I mean, we had people here who had just purchased a aesthetic record. They were going through COVID thinking like, I have no idea what to do with all the inventory on my shelf. I have all these people who now I've employed. I have no revenue to pay them. Like, what do I do? And it was sheer panic. I think that's one of the beauties of COVID taught us all that when you live outside your means, sometimes it's a little challenging to keep up. And I think, looking at the timing of what you did and when you did it was like the only answer. I think it was the best answer. But, you mentioned booking out. People ask me every single day, like, when do I hire another person? Or when do I move to a new location? Or when do I go from a one room at a Solta Salons to now opening a practice? Was there like a point in your journey that you and Brad sat down and said, okay, if we don't move somewhere bigger now, we're going to hinder the business, or this is as big as we're ever going to be? Like, if we're okay with this is good. But if we want to get bigger, we're going to have to do something more. Because I think that there has to be some like line in the sand where you both look at each other and say, okay, today is a day that we have to actually take this dream and put it into reality.
Yeah. I mean, 1,000%. It was probably when it was about maybe 9 months to a year into being at that plastic surgeon's office when COVID hadn't quite hit yet. And yeah, we were just getting super, super busy. I was at least 4 months booked up to the point where I couldn't even keep some of my own patients. And that's when we really decided we'll start looking. We'll start looking at spaces. I kind of left that part up to Brad. So he was the one to find our Denver location. And, you know, that whole process is brand new as well to both of us. So trying to compare, like, can we even afford this? What are the risks? Trying to make it as calculated as possible. But that's when we decided to actually pick our own space. We had nicely the security of me having quite a bit of bookings in the works already that we were able to just scoot over into another facility. So when we finally had a date ready that we were going to open, we had a few practitioners already. And while I was at the plastic surgeon's office, I was already booking out patients into the other practitioners. And by the way, I wasn't, like I said, an employee, so I wasn't taking any patients. They were definitely our own. So he was always aware. But yeah, it made it feel less scary than starting a business like what I had thought it would be like before. So that's when we decided to open. And luckily that worked out really well. That was after all the shutdowns. So I saw how the plastic surgeon had to kind of get through that with his own staff. And again, humbling. And it just kind of let us know that we need to make sure we have our plans and processes in place in case anything like that happened again. And then with your question of when to hire new staff, we usually go once we have a new practitioner, once they're roughly about, I would say 70% booked up and it's pretty consistent, we'll definitely start looking for a new practitioner. In the past, the hiring process that we had wasn't very structured. We would just do a couple of interviews and book them in. So that process didn't take very long. These days, when we're looking for a new practitioner, we know it's going to be a couple months before we have someone even close to ready to open their actual schedule. So if we have a majority of our practitioners booked out, still that 60 to 70%, or we're starting to have trouble getting people in, that's when we'll start to kind of look and see where we need to hire.
Well, that's a brilliant point. We do that here too. If a person's starting to get busy, it's time to hire, because by the time that person who you bring in gets onboarded, then whoever's already busy is going to be like, balls to the wall busy. I think,
Yeah.
especially in a med spa, I mean, if you're at 70% booked and you think about it takes, given whatever your process is, which I'd love to dive into, but if it takes from a month to 3 months to get them really onboarded and ready to see a patient, or even longer, 6 months, you don't have time to waste. Like, you got to get going. You got to get going quick, because by then they're at 90% booked, and then we're booking out. And as you and I both know, as it's becoming more and more competitive, patients will not wait. They used to wait for you. They'd wait 6 months. They'd wait a year. Now they're like, listen, Danielle's amazing, but so is Jane down the street. She's also amazing. I've seen them together in pictures, so I know that Danielle knows her. So obviously my injector thinks that she's a good enough injector. I'll just go to her because she's open next week. I mean, I think there's a part of it too with, as we've grown our community, which we all love, and I'm not saying anything about that, but as we've grown in our community, they see their injector with other injectors who might be local in the community. And it's like, well, I guess that's kind of a stamp of approval. I'll go do my lip filler over there for now. I'll try to get back in with Danielle later on. It's just the competitive nature of things right now. It's a colossal, we're in this, like, I don't know, this very interesting space. We want to all be together, but also there's this giant competition, and patients are no longer as loyal as they used to be. But to that degree, when you do onboard someone, what is that timeline? And like, what does that process look like? Is it a month? Is it 9, 6 months, whatever it is? Because I think some of these guys do a full year, and I'm like, my God, how can you not turn profit for them for a full year? I would never sustain that. But what do you guys do that makes it foolproof or unique to your practice?
So we're lucky enough now that we get quite a few applicants, especially in the injecting space. So what's nice now is we have a bit of a database of people that have applied in the past. And so usually when we're kind of starting to look, I'll just look through that list first, see if there's anyone that I kind of recognize, reach out to them initially. Otherwise, honestly, we just do like either an Instagram post saying we're hiring, or we use Indeed or LinkedIn. And once those emails start coming through, we'll have our operations managers just kind of sift through and do the initial checks of everyone to see who could be qualified. From that point, we schedule just a phone call interview. And by the way, we do a lot of steps that kind of seem a little bit redundant, but the point is to make sure the person checks out every single time. So first touch point is the phone call. Then we typically do a Zoom interview with the clinic manager that requires the new hire. then a Zoom interview with me, and then we have them come in for an in-person interview. With that one, typically we'll have, if it's a practitioner, we'll have them do, just kind of a regular interview with the usual questions. But then I'll go into having them do a consultation on a staff member and just kind of see what their bedside manner is like. Make sure it kind of fits the company culture, knowing that they're nervous. It's an interview. From that point, if that all checks out, then we'll book them in for, we'll send them, it's kind of like an exam that we'll have them do. I know it takes people from feedback about 3 to 5 hours to do, but it gives them case studies. It asks them questions specific to the position that they're in, how they would handle certain situations. Once I get that back, then I'll book them in for injecting a model or treating a model if they're an esthetician. Watch that whole process, get feedback from the model afterwards as well. And then from that point, we're getting closer to the hiring process. That's when I'll have a final interview with them, either in person or Zoom, go through the actual position, make sure that I'm really transparent about our rules and things that obviously they'd want to know before they even come on board. And then as long as they're happy as well, then we'll do the background checks, the DISC assessment, all of that stuff. And then after that, we will send them the letter of offer. So it's long. It's a long process, but the more I've done that, the more we protect the staff that we have and make sure that we have a correct fit for them, because you may need someone desperately, but that's not worth missing any of those steps to get the right people in, because you're then sacrificing the happiness of the rest of your patients and your staff.
I couldn't agree more. And here we found, people are different with different people. So the interview with our frontline manager, and they're one person. The interview with me, they're a whole different person. I think the idea of getting people to do it more than once is consistency is key. And it's interesting for us here. I've even had them go back through, they've interviewed with, let's say, the manager of the team, interview with me. And then it's like, wait a minute, we can't decide. We got a Jekyll and a Hyde. I love them. You didn't like them. And so I'm like, now I interview with people on the team. So we do a lot of things. We bring them in here and say, okay, this would be your colleague and you're on the sales team. This would be your team lead in the sales team. Work with them. Listen to what they do on calls, do their day-to-day to see kind of if we can assess a person in a real situation. Because to what you mentioned, they're nervous. They're coming in usually with their best self, which is not their normal self. I mean, ideally it would be, but in many cases it's not. And I think doing it a lot. I mean, this is a commitment. A job is a job. And I hear on LinkedIn every day, people are like, oh, you make it so hard to get hired. I see all these people on recruiters, there's so many interviews, so many steps. Yeah, but we're entering into a long-term partnership here. Whatever we have built, we're handing over to you and entrusting it to you. I need to know that you're ready to accept that responsibility. And I think people underestimate how much it takes to get good talent. I mean, even here, we'll do all this and they'll still leave. We'll onboard them. They're doing great. They love us. We love them. It's like, well, I just feel like I want to move back to so-and-so. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, and you invest all this time. And for you guys, it's like, no, I'm going to open my own med spa down the street. Equally is disturbing. But the amount of money it takes a practice to hire someone or a company, it's a tremendous investment of everyone's time. And then if it doesn't work out, it's like, a knife to the gut. But to your point, cut bait, move on. Cut bait, move on. You can't dwell on it. But you mentioned that they come in and inject. Do you ever hire people who don't have injection experience currently and want to learn to inject and kind of take them under your wing?
I would love to, because I know that I've been there where, you don't have any experience. Luckily for me, I was also in the med spa that I ended up learning at. But I get that it's painful because, so to answer your question, no, not at the moment. But it's just because, we're really busy. I don't have a training program yet. One day I would love to, but we just don't have the capacity to train. And I know what it's like in the first year of injecting. You kind of get to this hill where you think you're like, oh, I'm finally really getting it. I'm finally understanding this industry and the injecting and all the nuances. But then you get to year maybe 3 and you're like, wow, I knew nothing. That was scary. And so I know what it's like. And I usually require people to at least have about a year of experience just to work out those kinks, just to work out the little things that patients might see in them that makes them look maybe inexperienced, because I just want to have just that slightly higher level of experience with injectors. And I want it to be a similar experience for all the patients when they come in, and just meaning if they go to Lauren, they're going to have a great experience as well with Morgan, and because they're both very experienced. And so we don't usually it's about at that year experience, depending on how busy they were, is where we'll start to look at them.
Well, I think in 1 year, you're not totally ingrained in your methods yet. You're not like a jaded
Right.
practitioner who's like, I'm only ever going to do it this way. I think in a year, you just kind of cut your teeth. You have your baby teeth coming in. I think at that point, you can still turn them around, do things your way. And I agree with you that the infancy of people learning things is not my strong point. Like, I love to develop people. I love to take good to great, but to think about taking something, even here at Stack Record, we laugh because our CEO is an early stage founder. I'm a late stage founder. He takes something and takes nothing into something. I take something and make it awesome. We have very different skill sets. And I'm not a good person to say, here's vaporware where nothing exists and make something of it, because that initial like baby giraffe moment is not for me. The patience that it requires in that part of the development process, it ain't my strong point, sister. So I get it. I like be competent and then I'll make you awesome, but I can't make you competent. Like, it's just not where I live. But I
No.
do think that, you mentioned the company culture at some point a little bit earlier. That for us is very important. I'm sure it is for you too, especially as you go to 3 locations, because now the French fries have to taste the same at all 3 McDonald's. It's much different when you start to scale. What does the company culture look like, or the things that you tell a new person coming in, like, these are our non-negotiables? This is who you have to be when you come to work every day at Lux Room in order to assimilate into our culture and our brand.
You know, one of the biggest things that we really hold strong to is really just no gossip. If people have anything to say about anyone, we have them address it with each other. Honestly, I mean, just the fact that we don't allow it, we make sure that everyone just holds a really professional head on, and watch that and pull people up when they don't. I think just everyone knowing that that's our standard makes the biggest difference. People don't feel vulnerable at work. I feel like they really enjoy being there. They feel like we're all adults, we're all professional, and it keeps everyone else, it's like you throw a great person into a culture where there's no one being really held accountable for their actions, and they start to kind of lose their professionalism and the standard that they want to hold themselves to as well. So that's our biggest thing, is just no gossip, be a good person. And I know that sounds really simplistic, but the more that we've come down on that and any of the little behaviors that could lead into bigger issues, the better it's been, honestly. So we're at an amazing place as far as keeping culture throughout 3 clinics. I was listening to one interview you did with Shelby Miller, and she had a great point of, she was at a turning point of it could be one big location or many locations. And she spoke about the culture and how, dangerous really it could be with more locations, because it's so much easier to lose that culture and to have 3 individual clinics rather than the Lux Room being the same company. So I totally get that. And I think from when we decided to open Boulder, Brad and I really talked a lot about that and had that in mind. And we did make sure that we always have a culture where we're training people at different locations. We do group get-togethers where everyone's from all the locations kind of getting together. We have group chats throughout the clinic where it doesn't matter which location you're at. So it really does feel like the same clinic. And I've got that feedback from patients as well. No matter which location you're at, of course, they all have their own flair. But it is the Lux Room, no matter where you go. So
I remember that conversation with Shelby distinctly, because she was like, I decided that this was, while it was still a big beast to tackle, an easier beast. But, you mentioned going to practices and like being there. I think it's one of those things, if you have ever lived in an apartment and you had an absentee landlord, you hear about like those apartments that just become just disgusting and degraded
yes.
because the landlord never shows up. I feel like it's the
Yeah.
same for a practice. If you never walk into the practice and you're the person who is, whose name is on the door, is responsible for the experience, if you don't go there and inspect what you expect and also infuse you into the culture live, like in a real, face-to-face kind of arrangement, it's hard to sustain what you build. I mean, I have many friends who own practices across the country, and they don't go there, or they go there once a year. I'm like, how could you expect in a business to go check on it once a year and think it's ever going to be what you want it to be, unless you have a practice manager who loves it like you love it and who is in it, like, if it's a spouse, a sister, whoever, people who are in it with you, like in your boat. if you don't have that, like I can't imagine trusting some, just some random person that you've hopefully hired well and you've trained them well, but still it's not you. And it's just,
Right.
that's a lot of trust to put into someone. And I love the fact that you guys are kind of, not close together, but close enough where you can, drive back and forth and kind of go visit them because you got to be there. I think if you don't
Yeah.
go check it, it's not going to work. And when you look at your practice managers, I don't know if they've been here for a long time or if you're actively hiring people for management roles, but how does that look differently than when you're hiring an injector? Because I'm sure it's a much different business acumen kind of conversation than it is when you're obviously the injector part looking at skill set.
Oh, hiring managers versus practitioners. Yeah, that's that's harder. And the first manager that we had in Denver, we haven't had as many hiring processes for managers as we have for practitioners, obviously. But with our very first manager, she started as a front desk. We moved her into management in Denver. She ended up moving to another state. So that was a really big hire to find someone, because from the point that she started to when she left the clinic, the practices have just changed so much. And so with Denver being our highest volume, biggest clinic, it was almost like I was too nervous to even start looking. Plus we were busy anyway. So that hiring process, we took quite a few months to find someone, and we even did hire a really lovely person. But it just, there was nothing really bad. It just wasn't quite the right fit. So that was a classic example of hire slow, fire fast. And it's just a matter of, again, great person, just not the right fit for our company. And at that point, you really know what the bones of your company is and what your staff really need. So that hiring process took quite a while. We did, usually with that process, we have them come in and shadow for half day, full day at least. Lots of touch points there as well. But yeah, I think for that one, more the shadowing and seeing how they talk to the staff, the little things about how they talk to patients, where they're sitting, everything. I think it just kind of helps you to understand if they're going to be a good fit. But yeah, that process is different. For our operations manager, she started as our Boulder manager. So she's kind of moved into that role. Fort Collins manager, we had a really great hire initially, and then she had some personal changes in life, so she had to move. So I was kind of nervous to get another one. But the person that we have now is wonderful as well. So we've got a really, really great group of managers, and they all truly love the company. And I think that's so important, just because you want people to love where they're at, and you want them to enjoy it, because that'll trickle down to the rest of the staff. So the passion's there, and I think that's important for them.
And it's going to sound insane when I say this, but I feel like when you look at a practice, especially at scale, the front desk and the office manager dictate the DNA of the practice. Like an injector, while they are the ones delivering the goods in many cases, or esthetician, whoever the providers are, they are not replaceable. I don't mean that, but it is a skill set that you deliver the result. You go home at the end of the day, life is good. Unless there's an adverse event, no one's calling you at 9 o'clock at night. But if you're the practice manager, you're setting up protocols and SOPs and performance reviews and payment plan. You're doing more of the kind of, it's the bones of the operation. And I feel like when you look at hiring, the front desk is equally as important, because that's the patient billboard. That's who's kind of handling patient concerns. And many practices will do like a sort of a front desk concierge or a front of the house manager, and then obviously the back of the house manager. I think we don't spend enough time. I hear about these like 6-month programs for onboarding practitioners and these really in-depth things. And I think oftentimes the front desk or the office manager gets hired with much less concern, not concern, but much less, sort of digging around and looking at all the dirt. And then they are the ones who can sink the ship faster than anybody. I mean, obviously a bad outcome, which obviously we wouldn't hire people who can't do the thing. But I think a practice manager really dictates a lot of the DNA. And for you and Brad, when you look at your overall leadership, sort of makeup, how often do you guys meet together? Like here we do every 2 weeks, we all meet together in a room. We go through all the things that are happening. And obviously we're slacking each other 24/7 constantly. But how do you bring them all together and say, let's all align, let's work together? Do they work independently without you guys there? Like how does that work at scale to get everyone aligned to the same messaging across all the practices?
I based on feedback from the managers that we have, I know that Brad and I kind of are a lot more involved in the company, like a lot more involved, and especially Brad with the managers, because he's the operations brain. So daily he'll be having phone calls with them about anything that's really needed. So daily conversations for sure. We do have virtual kind of leadership meetings every week, and we'll just have we'll go through kind of a structured list of things that we need to discuss. But also the point of that too is just to make sure that every clinic doesn't start to segregate and turn into its own little brand. So we do make sure that we have those touch points with everyone every week all together. Other than that, yeah, we used to use Slack and now we just use the GChat channel. It's really handy. It's all within the emails and everything. So we just make sure that we have people that are really good communicators. And I think, you know, just making sure that we don't ever seem like we're not people that you can reach out to, because I think from the places that most of our managers have been, the owners are a lot more hands off, which is common. Brett and I don't want to be. We love doing all of this. We love to be integrated with it, but we want to make sure that they have the tools they need to make decisions as well, so that we're not doing all the little things. But yeah, it's important, I think, to make sure that you're very accessible, or as accessible as you can be for the managers, to make sure everything stays cohesive.
Well, and for you, it's critical because as we kind of turn the page here, you're also a gain trainer. So you are giving up time in the clinic, and as the office, you know, the management part of the office is also, I'm sure, every day is a new crisis, as it is here. Giving up time doing that to now go out and train other people, which to the point of hiring is also a benefit because you get to see the folks who are learning and growing and maybe wanting to move. But I won't talk about that here right now. It's a different podcast. But how do you make that choice? Because I also get this feedback, even from my gain days years ago. People would say, I have a passion for teaching. I want to do this. But to be out of my clinic, I'm losing money, number one. So I lose money. But number two, I'm also losing time in the clinic where I need to be seeing patients. I'm overly booked. I'm trying to run a business. At what point do you and Brad look at each other and say, okay, we can afford, in time to do this for you to leave the practice X amount of days a week or a month. We have great management in place. We can make this work. And is that because you're passionate about it and you want to do it, or it's just like the next step in your career? Like, how do you decide to do that in the middle of all the other chaos that you have going on in your life?
I totally hear anyone that is a naysayer on the training, whether it's with Allergan, Galderma, whoever, and they're a clinic owner as well. I totally get it. I love training. I like to stay diversified. I don't like closing doors. However, in the first year that we were open and with the Denver office, I was asked to be a trainer. And I declined at the time. I just needed to get my head around this new career of owning a business and having employees, and it just wasn't the right time. But I decided to, because I do like change. I like growing. I feel like if I didn't do any training, not that I'd be stagnant, there's plenty going on, but I just feel like it was kind of just the next step. It was interesting when you said before about not enjoying training from absolute ground up, and it's nice there. I feel like in the gain world, like I enjoy training brand new people if they're not our new hires, but I much prefer training practitioners that have been doing it for a while, because I love the challenging questions. I think it's just, you can do a little bit more and have a little bit more fun with it. But I like the diversity of it. I like the training. I like kind of where it leads. I like meeting new people. And I think, one thing that's changed too, when you first open a business, you're pretty protective of everything. And I started to let that go just a bit, as far as, training on your techniques and all this stuff. I think that it's important to keep certain things to your practice only, but at the same time, building a community and just having people that you can talk to and never, I think just knowing which injectors are around and what their skill sets are, seeing them inject. I think if they ever came around and applied, then I just have a little bit better idea of who they are. But I also like our practitioners to know other injectors in Colorado. I think it's a really healthy thing to have the community aspect of it. I really believe that.
And I think you also are a person who kind of, I don't want to say goes with the flow. I don't mean that to sound lackadaisical, but I'll give you guys an example. Last year, we had a person in the cadaver lab for aesthetic necks who called out, didn't show up, and Danielle gets a phone call at probably 4 a.m, like, hey, can you come do a cadaver lab for us? And this is like a high stakes thing. We have 2 classes back to back. I mean, people paid a lot of money for this. And you were like, yep, I'll do it. And then I think that led into you doing a different cadaver lab with Dr. Sadat in Colorado. You've now, I think you're doing, 3 talks this year in aesthetic necks, including leading a panel, 2 workshops. I think you were kind of in the mindset of, I have the skill set to do, I've trained enough, I know enough, I'm up to date on all the things, that this is a great next step. And now it leads to other things. I think at some point, being a trainer, learning how to educate others in a formal manner, where you actually learn how adults learn and what to say, what to
Yeah.
do, how to assess, understanding. There is such a benefit for that just for long term, because all things in your life that you do from this point forward are going to be about teaching someone to do something. And I think when you come in as a nurse, let's say from a hospital, this is like career number 2, right? Now I'm learning to be a business owner, which I've never done before. So I've been like maybe I was a shift lead. I don't know what you call it in a hospital, but like a shift lead person.
Yeah.
I was the head, the HBIC. I was the head bitch in charge of the hospital. Now I'm like, I'm back to being a nobody because I'm starting over from scratch. And I'm
Yeah.
a great practitioner, but now I got to open a business. I have to do Instagram and TikTok now. I got all this crap I got to do. And then it's like, now I got to learn how to be an educator and be a trainer and be a teacher. It's like you're starting a career over multiple times in this industry because
Yeah.
everything here is so different and so not medical in many ways. It's not what you've been trained to do. But when you do it well, the doors just sort of magically start opening and the things
Totally.
present themselves. And if you're not ready to take advantage of it, they do kind of go away. I mean, luckily for you, you were able to get a trainer job the second year. In many cases you can, but sometimes if you say no enough, they're like, well, we'll quit asking. But
Yeah.
I feel like I've watched you kind of go from this starting a business, getting your feet wet to now you're on stage holding your own, you're doing cadaver labs, all these different things. But I think it's because you just sort of carpe diem. You just took advantage of it and said, yep, I'll jump in, calculate a risk, I'll do the thing and see where it
Yeah.
goes. And it's worked.
And it's worked. And I think like I always used to think that was kind of a bad quality that I have because I'm a yes person. And obviously, when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. But also, when it comes to stuff like this, I'll say yes, maybe without even being prepared, but you learn. Like, you just have to kind of go with it. And that was probably the scariest moment in my life when I got asked to do that cadaver lab. I was going to ask if you were sure. And I didn't, in case you weren't. And so, anyway, worked out. I think I stayed up. I got probably 3 hours of sleep that night. But it was amazing. And it's just like, once you get in there, you kind of go back to realizing, you know what you're talking about. It's just the teaching aspect, to your point, is the part that is almost like another thing to learn how to teach people that stuff, because you know what you're talking about. It's just how to make it applicable to that person, defining their current skill level. And I think with the game training, that's another thing that's been really helpful, is just learning the structure of training. When I train new hires, it's a lot more flowy. It's kind of it's one-on-one typically, because they're new with us and you know who the person is. And again, they're usually people that have at least a little bit of experience. Whereas when I started game training, honestly, the first one that I ever did was kind of scary, because I'm like, oh my God, I have to remember on label, off label. And I just train on whatever in our practice. And it's just kind of a different, it's another whole career change in a way. So that's been really helpful to just learn how to train properly and structured. So no, it's been fun. I love training. Been traveling a little bit more for gain this year, which has been really fun, albeit it's the Midwest, but that's where I grew up actually. So it was kind of funny to go back.
Yeah, I love the fact that you can hear your little Australian accent, although you're not like an Australian, but it's like you are,
Yeah.
because I can hear it. Your husband obviously has a wonderful accent, but I can definitely hear it when
Yeah.
you talk too. But I think what
Yes.
you said about gain, people who come to a gain training and they know nothing at all, and they're learning how to inject in a gain training, it's like total cringe for me. Because again, what you just said, you're on label. You can't be forthcoming about. You can't talk about adverse events really. I mean, you can't talk about hyaluronidase. Like, it's just not
Yeah.
the place for that. And I think if you're a practice owner listening to this, sending your people to gain trainings who are not an equipped injector with at least a base level skill set, you're doing a disservice to everyone else in that training. Because the
Yeah.
person who doesn't know anything that's in that training, if it's like one of those community trainings where they kind of come from different practices, they take the oxygen out of the room because they need so much more help. And
Yeah.
either you feel like as a trainer that you can't give them what they need, and so you're disappointed, in yourself or how the training is going,
Yeah.
or the other folks are like, wait a minute, we're trying to figure out how to make our lips even more amazing, not how to actually inject a lip for the first time. So I think it's just such a dichotomy of you're sad, they're sad. It's like, wait a minute, we could have just done this whole thing differently, and we would have been way better off. So
Yeah.
I pay for the training, send them somewhere else, like do the thing. Don't
Yeah.
expect Danielle to walk in and teach them how to inject for the first time in a game training. It's
Yes.
not going to happen.
And it's happened.
But I think another. I don't know if you guys all. I'm sure know Kyle Farr, but he's the one that put your name out and said, "Hey, Danielle will be great in this cadaver lab." Like, another practitioner had not even a minute of hesitation. Said, "Oh, I know a girl who's here who'd be great. Call her up. Let's do it." And I think part of the community that you mentioned is people who will talk about you in a room that you're not in a way that is becoming of you and that is helpful for you. And that he said she's got the skill set to do it. She may not be ready to do a cadaver lab right now because it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but
Yeah.
she'll be ready for tomorrow. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the community that you grow, is when you impress people with your skills, they want to work with you. And I think even if you're not planning to hire someone, if you're out training and such, learning and listening to others and finding out who could be in your, in your sort of community or your tribe. In those cases, is great. You could do a collaborative training program. You could do some CMEs together. You could do virtual webinars. Like, there's always a reason to know a person in the community who's great at what they do, because you learn from each other, and also you can collaborate and do more cool stuff. So shout out to Cal Far for being a great community advocate and helping us to connect last year. So that was very good.
1,000%. That was amazing.
But I do want to talk about a little bit here before we roll off. You were in a country with lots of things that we don't have in the U.S., so you've kind of gotten to see the other side of the coin. In Australia, it's much like the U.S. So, I mean, as far as like the market's very, very big, very popular, everyone does it. But you have all kinds of tricks and tools, I'm sure, that we have never seen and probably won't see for another 10 or 15 years. But I know we talked about skin boosters a little bit inside of your pre-work form. What are the things that you've been doing over there that you did do that you're seeing finally come here, and that we should either be worried about and cautious of, or that you are thrilled that we're finally going to get them in our toolbox?
I think, well, when I first got over here, because I never injected in the States, obviously, before I moved here, and the names of the products are sometimes different. That kind of threw me off. There was a lot of talk right away about cannulas, and in Australia, I think they get things approved a little bit faster. They have the TGA rather than the FDA, which is normally more strict, but in aesthetics, things get approved pretty quickly over there. So they had a lot of the products already that were quite new over here. So it's kind of handy because I knew how to use a lot of them already, especially in the filler world. Cannulas were easy right away. I know it's now common a lot more here. But that's what I found really beneficial as far as what people can talk about in the trainings, like in gain trainings over there. On label, off label. I mean, it's really, things are just approved. Most of the fillers are just approved for soft tissue augmentation. And so, I was lucky enough to be able to watch a gain training when I went in December last year. And it was just so interesting because we were doing, well, I wasn't injecting, but they were doing injections in places that I wouldn't even be able to talk about in a gain training here. But it's the difference in the approval process, and less restrictive in a way, which was kind of nice for them to be able to train properly. So skin boosters is one. They have Profile over there. There's lots of different products that I know I've heard are maybe on their way over here. So in that way, I feel like they're a lot more advanced, and I love to get to talk to old colleagues when I'm over there about what they're doing and the products that they have. There's a lot more over there. Not as much as what's in Europe. I think it's nuts how much is actually available to use over there. Good for us because we kind of get to learn through them when things get approved over here. We kind of have at least people that we can talk to and know the history. So lucky for us, they get to be the guinea pigs though, unfortunately. So
yeah, skin boosters are coming. We've been waiting on this when I was at Galderma almost, I don't know, a long time ago.
yes.
I left 5 years ago. We were working on it then to try to get the skin booster, the mechanism, the device that actually does it for you with silk, all that approved. And it was like, we can't biopsy the skin to see if it actually boosted anything or not. But now they've got, obviously AI, vector, all these things coming out, we can do it now. So I think that is on the way here, which is really, really great. But you also went to Norway and trained with Julie Horn on lips. I think lips is kind of your forte. It's you're a lip ninja. So for those people who are like, I want to go far away and learn, what are the benefits of going? Because I'm a big advocate of you should go to Europe and you should go wherever you can. If you can afford to go somewhere, go. Because in the U.S. we have, it's not that it's all the same, but we have the same, to your point, products, same, similar techniques. When you go to Europe, I've spent a lot of time with the European injectors. Your mind is kind of blown. They do a lot of, if you go with the Asian injectors, your mind's really blown because they do crazy stuff and they're like, do it all so fast. But give us an idea of, what's the reason for us to buy that ticket, get on the plane and go somewhere else?
Well, I mean, at first it was kind of an excuse for more travel, and at least this way I can write it off on business. We love travel, but I mean, you're exactly right. When it comes to mind blown, we did Monaco, the AMWC in Monaco last year, and just walking through the exhibition hall, I could not believe how many fillers were available. There was literally 5cc syringes, 10cc, I think it was 10cc syringes as well, literally just booty filler. That's what it was meant for. I think I was talking to one German injector and she was saying there's over 500 HA products available there. And, that it would be scary. I know every country is a little bit different over there, but I think they're just able to learn so many different things. The way they inject techniques might be different. Whether you're able to use those products or not here in the US, it just helps to expand your mind a little bit, because just like what you said, I mean, we all follow other injectors on Instagram. We know other injectors in the community, and naturally you're going to kind of learn from other people and adapt certain skill sets and techniques, but it doesn't vary as much here as I feel like it would in other countries. And so I loved going over there. I love when I can watch injectors in Australia too, because there's just things that maybe techniques or reasonings or things that they've learned that we just don't ever talk about here. And I think it's easy to get stuck in your ways with injecting sometimes. So yeah, I love going overseas and watching how they do things, just even for the shock value of it. So
Yeah. Yeah, like the Turkish people, their shock value. It's funny because when I was working with Gain in the very early stages, I spent a lot of time, like I said, in Europe with people who were, had already kind of been doing a Gain kind of thing there. They were doing these country trainings. And what I always found fascinating was that in the US, and I tried so hard not to do this, but when we launched Cannula, I had no choice. We taught a paint by numbers process. Like when we did Cannula, I was like, you're going to put the porthole here, you're going to put the porthole here, you're going to make this, this design. I remember making the PowerPoint slide right now where I had to like draw out the places. You go to Europe, and that is like, they laugh at us for that. They're like, why in the hell would you have a map for a face? Like, that's not how, this is not how this works. So I remember showing this to some of the Gain guys overseas, like, hey, is this a good cannula? And they're like, well, what are you doing? Like, no, everybody's different. And I think they inject so anatomically focused there. I mean, even when Priya came last year from Europe, she's an English injector. She's like, why are we not using the layers in the face and the anatomical spaces that we have available for us to inject? Like, why do you guys do the same thing for everyone? And she was kind of like baffled by the fact that we don't all think about unique anatomy and layering and using less product to do more things because of how we're structuring the face. And we just haven't, we had MD codes. We had what was it, Z1 or V1, V2, V3. We kind of did paint by numbers. I think because our industry grew so fast and the skill set couldn't keep up, we had to find a way to bridge the gap. But I think we're starting to see now a sculpture with like the biomedicine layer that's coming out. Everyone's doing all these bioidentical things, and they're backfilling HA with sculpture, et cetera, et cetera. That's starting to change a bit, and I don't know if that's a good thing, Danielle, or a bad thing that we're going off the grid. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, with that kind of stuff, I just remember when I first came back over here and watched somebody injecting, how it was a lot more structured. And while I think, especially now from a trainer's eye, I think that's great to get some foundation, but it's almost like it didn't expand much further than that. For instance, there was one talk at AMWC, the one in Europe, and they were just talking about A-line filler like it was nothing, like just doing upper canthal HA filler, like it's nothing. Obviously, the good and the bad about it, but it wasn't, it was more about people having a conversation. It wasn't because I mean, I wouldn't do it, but, it wasn't all of a sudden just because someone said something, it's like, oh, I would never, ever. And all of a sudden it's kind of a talking point. It was more just like a discussion about it. So, definitely safety things considered, I think it's just the talks are a little bit more open there. So yeah, it's mind-blowing, but interesting to watch for sure.
Well, I've been in rooms, some including Arthur Swift, which was an interesting thing. That was 10 years ago, before he was still famous, but not quite what he is today. And watching them fight with each other, like they openly fight, and they either yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down. Like they're screaming at each other in this room, like that's not the right way to do it. Do this, but it's an open dialogue. Like no one walks away mad at each other. Like it's not that kind of thing. But they are like screaming with passion. This is how it should work. No, this is how it should. When we launch refine and define here, this whole idea of like tagliatelle pastas, how refine and define look, under a microscope, and how you use that to your advantage. So I'm watching in this room of all these probably 10 international KOLs, the top of their field, fighting it out, battle royale to get to the answer. If in the U.S. we sat in a room with 10 of our top KOLs and said, let's take the gloves off and go battle, they would never do it because of the political implications of what that would mean for their career. Now, if you have Subio in the room, maybe he would do it.
Yeah.
A few others, but because he has the cojones to do it because he doesn't give a shit. Everyone else would be like, oh my gosh, I would never insult so-and-so and never say that to them. They don't care over there because it's not about the person. It's about the skill, the technique, the product. I just think the dialogue to what you just said is so much more open and welcoming of naysayers and of dissenters, where here you want to write your check to be canceled. Go tell somebody on Instagram if they're not doing the right thing. Like, go call them out. And I don't know if it's a dependency here on social media, and that's one of the reasons why. But I just feel like if you go to Europe and you ask somebody what you think about something, you get an answer in a room, and they'll be like, "I think that they're a shit injector, and here's why." And then the person will say, "Well, I think you're a shit injector, and here's why." Well, how can we both use what we think we do well and find a new technique? And they'll figure it out in the room and walk away happy. Where here they'd be like, "You're dead to me." It would never happen.
Totally. And I think I saw that a lot on the panels when we were over there too. Like, never quite fights, but definitely heated conversations. And it was just about, I don't know, it was almost respectful. Like even Shino Bay was there and he was giving his opinion, but it was a respectful way of doing it. It was just having that discussion up there, because that's how you learn, but it wasn't, it was never ego involved or anything like, and I shouldn't say never, not with him, obviously, but there wasn't really ego involved with it. And so I think it's just open conversation, but I think it's the best way to learn. I like openness. But we have to be a little careful sometimes, I suppose.
But I think it's going to be an interesting year for us. We've got so many cool new things coming out, and your practice as well. I'm sure you're doing all kinds of fun new things, but looking down the pipeline 5 years from now, where do you want Lux Room to be? And are there any things that you're not doing today that you want to get into, if it's functional, whatever, that you're just like, if I don't get this thing done, it's just going to, I have to get this integrated into our practice, or that you wish would come out that you want to integrate into practice?
5 years from now, I think we may or may not have more locations. I mean, growth, we're both really growth minded. So I do hope there's growth, whether that's in the practices that we have or a couple more locations. As far as new products, I love all things biostimulator, bioregenerative. I think it's one of those things where you're so busy, you want to bring on everything, but you just got to kind of put your thinking cap on and decide what's best for the practice. But I love that the whole injecting space is going that direction. I think patients really vibe with that. Everyone's on board with bioregenerative. So I do hope more and more comes to the US, and I know it is. So that's what I'll be waiting for with open arms, for sure.
Yeah, I'm on the PDRN wagon and the PCRN. The injectable format, and also injectable exosomes. I'm waiting for, I know that Rion has an FDA study in right now for an injectable format, and I'm like, that's going to change. If I can inject an exosome and it tells my face to release the wrinkle without Botox anymore, or Dysport or Zeman or whatever else, imagine that in your practice when you can program your little messenger to go tell the skin what to do, and you can eliminate the need for the actual prescriptive delivery of a product. It's just mind-boggling to me. I did an episode with that group last year, and I was just like in awe of the whole episode of like, you're shitting me. That's not real. It's like, yep, this is how it works. I'm like, oh my God, like I gotta be part of this. So in 5 years, you'll be doing that, Danielle. You'll be doing exosomes. You'll be doing all kinds of crazy stuff at 10 locations, and you'll be a crazy person probably. But
I'll be waiting for you for that. No, that's exciting. We'll have one ready for you.
Yes, lots of fun things to come. But yeah, guys, definitely in September, go check it out. There's a pre-show event with the new Injector Boot Camp that does not require you to go to the conference. So if you're local in Dallas, you can come to that. Or if you're, anywhere around here and you can't stay all weekend long, no worries. And then obviously core is live injections. Then we have the lightning round on Sunday, which is going to be very, very fun. And then you'll be flitting around all weekend long doing all kinds of stuff. I'm sure we'll see you everywhere. But definitely go check it out. And if you're in Colorado and you can train with Danielle, I would recommend finding a training that she's at, whether it's at Galderma or even privately, and get signed up for that, because you will have a great experience. But with all that, Danielle, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Any last words for our audience?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me. This has been great. But yeah, definitely come to Aesthetic Next. I've been to all of them since I've known about it, and it's always a blast. It's the highlight of the year for sure. You'll love it. Yeah,
get your outfits ready for the evening events, because we're gonna have some fun. But yes. I will see all of you next week on For the Record. And Danielle, thank you for your time today and sharing all of your interesting story. Your backstory is so cool, but also we wish you the best of luck with more locations and more things and adding more stuff to your pile of stuff you already have to do. So keep grinding, my friend, and I will see you very, very soon.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of For the Record. This podcast is not intended to provide legal or medical advice. It's for entertainment, education, and information purposes only. For more information on this week's guest or to get started with Aesthetic Record, email us at info@aestheticrecord.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more fresh perspectives on disrupting the status quo and surviving in the aesthetics industry.